the update on the ARPA funds, the COVID funds, the whatever you want to call it, and let it loose there, Paul.
All right, we'll try to stay on schedule. Back in April, was my last update in regard to ARPA funds. So we thought at that time it would be right to give everyone another update since we're getting close to the end of the year. So I'll go through just some history. As you know, we received just over $4 million. It came in by the end of July of 2022. There are various uses, purposes that the funds can be used for, like public health emergency, economic impact, replace town's loss of revenue, general government services, premium pay for essential workers, and water, sewer, and broadband infrastructure. So the town did utilize $350,000 for grants that were given to 14 nonprofit organizations back in July of 2022. We utilized another $2.5 million toward the wastewater treatment plant phase 2 project. This covered some of the initial costs that were associated with the project. $33,900 was used for environmental testing related to 600 Ridge Road in the West Webster hamlet. $302,000 was designated as premium pay for the law enforcement's response during COVID-19. This will be dispersed over 3 years. In 2024, we dispersed $132,000, and in 2025 and 2026, we're slated to disperse $85,000 in each year. We have utilized, we have not utilized the entire amount. We earmarked $170,000 for the Sandbar Park building. This was earmarked back in April. Thus far, we've spent $69,000. So there's still about $101,000 remaining of that earmarked piece. Doesn't necessarily have to stay earmarked for Sandbar Park. We have flexibility to change that. So just in summary, of the $4,050,000 that we received, we have actually expended $3,085,000. There's $170,000 that's currently obligated. That's for the premium pay. And then for future obligations, we have about $796,000 available. So that could be obligated for other things. So we do propose use of the remaining funds. So these funds must be obligated by the end of the year. So we're quickly coming up to the end of 2024. The final rule issued by the federal government says they must be obligated or basically under contract by the end of 2024. But we do have until the end of 2026 to spend the funds. So we do have this goes back to April. This is what we discussed and proposed to spend the remaining balances. So we can just go through each one. So we proposed to earmark $170,000 for the animal control dog count. So to date, none of these funds are obligated, so we don't have a contract. We thought about using the balance toward the highway building project. This is a fully obligated project, so we can, if we wanted to, we could use the entire amount for the highway building project. As I said earlier, we earmarked $170,000 for the Sandbar Park building. To date, we spent $69,000, so that's partially obligated. Sandbar Park phase 2 and 3, we have earmarked $170,000. That's currently not under contract. So it doesn't look like that's going to make it by the end of the year. We thought about spending $15,000 on speed monitoring equipment. Doesn't look like that's going to happen either. No purchase orders have been issued. And the last one is the Webster Hamlet. We had earmarked $170,000. We have spent to date about $115,000, of which the $33,900 I mentioned earlier is part of that. So you could say that we're partially obligated to that one. So when you boil down to it, there's no obligation for 3 of the 6 original choices. So there are possible uses for the remaining $796,000. As I said, could go toward the highway building, could go toward the Sandbar Park engineering, could go toward the Westchester Hamlet, or we've been talking lately about possibly putting money toward the tax assessment reevaluation consulting contract. So actually, I think Donna's going to come up and give you a little more background information on that particular option.
Yeah, so this idea came up just a couple of weeks ago. We were emailing around and we had a meeting with the think tank people.
And I'm sorry, for all the, Donna Komar is the town assessor.
Okay.
So Paul Adams, finance director, Paul just handed the baton to Donna because this is granular and specific to a revaluation that would fall into the assessment department. So
Sorry for not introducing myself.
it's okay.
So we were just talking about, we haven't done a townwide revaluation in 20 years now. There's been a lot of really good reasons why we have not. Many of those reasons have resolved themselves, and it's time to begin seriously considering whether and when to do a townwide revaluation. So when this was presented to me, the question was, could we possibly fit that in and use these funds? So I did determine and verified at the supervisor's request that there are at least 3 companies that are familiar with Monroe County that could provide us with proposals that would commit to this project for the 2027 assessment roll, and they could make that commitment by the end of this year. In other words, we could contract these funds, if the board so desires, for a townwide revaluation project for the 2027 assessment roll as soon as December 31st of 2024. We would begin work on the project in January of 2026 because it's a 27 assessment roll. And for people who are not familiar with an assessment roll, it doesn't work like a calendar year. It starts and ends in July, publicly published, but the work actually goes from March to March, and very quickly I could go off in the weeds on a lot of technical detail. But suffice it to say, we haven't done a revaluation in 20 years. It will be an 18 to 24 month project, so these funds would be beneficial for this type of project if the board wanted to consider allocating for this cause. The project would be completed for the tentative assessment roll on May 1st of 2027. It would then go through the grievance process as every roll does. It would be finalized July of 2027. What you don't see on your screen and what I want to make clear to the viewers at home is that this would be for tax bills September of 2027, January 2028, and for village residents June of 2028. But we have to begin thinking about this project and putting the pieces together now. So there's 2 perspectives of when the revaluation would start. I said launch in this screen, January launch of 2026. That's when the public will begin to be aware. But well before that, in-house, there's a launch. And we begin the work reorganizing the computer, getting on board, a lot of meetings with the vendor. How are you going to do this? What do we want to do with that? Delineate neighborhoods, we need land tables, and we need a lot of computer work to go into it, which I would be the lead for that. So the public would become aware of this more in January of 2026 timeframe. A townwide reassessment always encompasses 2 town budget periods, which is why this would work for 2027. It's not a rush. We have time to think about how we want to do it responsibly. what exactly needs to be done, what we can reuse, what parts of our assessment role we could reuse, the computer parts behind the scenes, and what needs to be freshened up. And it gives us a lot of time to communicate to our public, because I am fully aware that there are people in our community who have bought a home and have had and enjoyed it for a number of years and have never seen a revaluation on their property. So there's going to be a lot of community involvement. We need to communicate a lot of our information and timetable to the community. And so these funds would go towards not only the project, but also a PR campaign. When I called the vendors that were familiar with Monroe County that I would trust to do a project for the town of Webster, I emphasized that public relations was not going to be their usual canned, we're used to revals, we only needed to remind you of the deadline type public relations campaign. That we were looking for a very robust campaign, and when we get to the level of quotes, whether it's with these funds or another project at another timetable, we do want them to give us their best PR people and their efforts. If we need to hire outside that, then I'll be back to the board and talking about that as well. So the budget does go from the calendar year, and the assessment role goes from mid-year to mid-year, so it would encompass 2 budget cycles. These funds would go towards the first part of that revaluation campaign, which is actually the most expensive part, and then we would need to budget the balance of it in our 2027 budget. And I believe that this timetable also gives the board time to consider how to make up that difference. For perspective, if we're talking 800,000 for this, we may need another 200 to 400,000 beyond that, depending on the extras and what exactly we need to do. But we need to get into the granular of that before we can actually itemize that cost. Are there any questions about the project that I would like to present to you?
Thank you. Jenny, you want to start?
Well, I need to think about this one, and do some more research on it. I really appreciate the presentation, and with a lot of projects going on around that we have, so we have to prioritize, which is, put a precedent over.
Of course, if I can be of assistance, please let me know. Yes, answer your questions.
And maybe I should have done this instead of going to Q&A. And Donna, you did a wonderful job summing up that page. You are always very detailed and you're speaking it right. I'm going to make this really simple for the community watching this, the people that are here, anybody that watches this on tape in the future. Today's November 7th. In 54 days, our chariot becomes a pumpkin. By December 31st, 2024, we have to be in contract on all of the ARPA money, pure and simple. So the time of discerning what do we use it for, what ideas do we use it for, we are running out of time. Now, we already have a stopgap or a default because we have a highway garage going on, and as Paul described earlier, we could just use the full $795,000 that's left and just say, well, that's in contract, so it meets the being in contract by December 31st, 2024, and it also means that it would be spent by December 31st, 2026. Very tight guidelines on this money. However, as we just said, and this kind of came about in the last week or two, so it's not ideal, the timing, as far as this goes. But if there's $800,000 sitting there that we could use of this ARPA money to do a revaluation that won't start for 14 months, and we get into a contract by December 31st with a revaluation company, that's an interesting use of that $800,000. Now the board, what I'm asking them tonight is that we already have reached out to 3 usual suspects. This is not the type of thing that there are 1,000 firms that help revaluations of communities this large. So Donna reached out to those 3 firms and said, hey,
would you, on your schedule, at least be eligible to entertain this for January 1st, 2026? 14 months from now. And I wasn't really that surprised. They said, yeah, if we can get that in contract by December 31st, 2024, we have a full year to kind of prepare for that. Now, as Paul said, based on our procurement policy, didn't say it in your presentation tonight, but that somewhat meets the fact that we are getting 3, if you want to call it, bids, proposals. So the question for the board is, would you like Donna, Paul, and the parties, Bridget, Harvey has helped with this also, to continue that process with these 3 firms and come back on November 21st or December 5th at that board meeting and say, hey, here is what the contract would look like, at least what these 3 firms bid, and if we decide to do this, we would have to be in contract with them by December 31st, 2024. And I'll just leave you with this. Selfishly, I've watched Irondequoit, Penfield, and other communities venture off into revaluations, kind of ready, shoot, aim, nothing against those communities, but it is a very tense situation, misunderstood, causes a lot of anxiety for the citizens. I've always thought we should get a public relations firm to spend 6 months to 12 months prior to us starting the revaluation to educate the citizens in smaller groups or mailers and take away 90% of that anxiety through education, so that when Donna and her staff starts a revaluation, theoretically, January 1st, 26, 14 months from now, 90% of the community and property owners would be like, I understand how this works. I'm not going to get these letters and all of a sudden lose sleep over it. But that's good public relations. So this timing, albeit we're coming to you with 54 days left in the year, it could really be beneficial for a community that hasn't done a revaluation in over 20 years and has an equalization rate right now that is at 52% and is trending toward 48% for next year. Translation, if your house is assessed in Webster for $100,000, it means we think the market value when you sell it is around $200,000. You want that equalization rate to be the market rate, if you can. And that's why not doing a revaluation for 20 years has brought that down, because houses have gone up in value. I'll get off my soapbox. Does that help with any questions from the board members?
I have no questions. I've been on the board long enough to know that one of the reasons, although Donna did not state it, that we have not addressed this, was always the cost.
Yes.
And where are we going to fit it into a budget? And this is long overdue. And I think that it is a really wise expenditure of the remaining ARPA funds. I know that when we were first looking at ARPA funds, December 31st, 2024 seemed like it was all the time in the world to make that decision. And as you say, all of a sudden we're looking at it, it's 54 days. And as I said, I think this is a perfect use for those funds.
So, this doesn't need resolution. I just want, does the board, at this meeting, are they giving instruction to Donna, Paul, myself, Keith, if you're in an RFP, whoever else, to go to those 3 firms that you've already talked to, Donna, and now have them put pen to paper to bring us proposals that the board could then look at in 2 weeks at the next board meeting or whatever. It really is simple. If we decide not to do this for whatever reason, I already said we have the default. We can use the ARPA money for the highway garage. We're not going to lose the ARPA money. It's just, I don't know, my personal opinion, it would be a shame if we lost an opportunity to use $800,000 for something specific like the rebuild. So
I definitely would like her to reach out to the 3 firms, and I'd like to see the scope. I'd like to also know what the overall cost is going to be. So and the sooner the better, in my opinion. I'd like to have that information prior to the board meeting. I don't want to sit in a board meeting and start reading that and make a decision, but I know that you will provide that information as soon as we get it.
I can tell you that if we didn't want to do any data verification or any data collection, which is one part that you can opt into or out of, I believe we need it. That would keep the cost down, and then we could stay under $1 million. We're going to add that. We're definitely at 1 million plus. We have complex properties. They're going to want to do that. Can't be handled by mass appraisals, so we're going to need appraisers to do those properties, those complex properties. I'm thinking of Fairlife. I'm thinking of Xerox, similar properties, right? Those are two big complex properties. So I can bring you the all things being equal quotes from one another. I wouldn't mind having a team of the people that were in the room the other day discussing this, be a vetting committee and actually interview them and tell us what they're going to do for our PR, as opposed to me just sitting on the phone with them. I would like to hear a lot more from them on that particular topic that may change the price from their usual standard pricing system. But a quick answer to your question, Councilman Cahill, is $1 million plus. And
Well, then, as Patty said, who's been on the board the longest, what is one of the main reasons why it hasn't been done in 20 years, Patty?
the cost. And if I can bounce this off of the finance director, it's always been my understanding, this is his bailiwick, but it's always been my understanding, this type of a project, it is always 100% paid for by the municipality. The assessment roll is utilized by all of the special districts, the town, the village, the county, and the school district, but we bear 100% of the cost. And sometimes the laws in New York don't make a lot of sense, and it's my understanding that the way the town is allowed to finance this, it does not qualify for a capital project. And you were just going over your capital project matrix. I thought that was actually a great lead-in, because it reminded me this project, although it costs $1 million plus, will never qualify for that. And so what you would be asking taxpayers to do is to bear an initial, over the course of the 2 budget years, you have to budget in the year the work is done for each one of these parts, and it is really heavily weighted towards that first year. So you would have to raise the taxes on the taxpayers to afford it, which is why, one of the reasons why it has not been done. And this is a wonderful opportunity to have the money handed to us.
I think we have our marching orders, Donna.
Highways.
Unless I think the board is like,
Yeah.
get back
I hear
to
from
the
2
board
of you. I
members
guess Tom will be
with,
the tiebreaker,
whether it's
right?
alternatives, here's a $1 million offer that has base bones, here's $1.2 million that has these things, which we would look at those and go, why do we need those things? You'll need to explain those, whether that's at a workshop on the 21st or whenever you get these. We have our marching orders. And we'll get our crew together and
Moving
get
forward,
that
and I'll be back.
information.
Is that what you're saying?
You got it, Donna.
All right.
And it's
Thank you
good
very
to
much
have
for
you
your time.
back.
It's
It
good to
is
be back.
good to have you back.
Yes.